Silence used to frighten me. In the city, silence meant something was wrong. An unpaid bill, an argument waiting to happen, a child who hadn't called. Silence carried weight there. It pressed against my chest like a warning. But the silence in the forest was different. Here it breathed. When I first arrived at the cottage, it was early spring. The road that led to it was narrow and unpaved, winding through tall pines that leaned toward each other like old friends sharing secrets. The air smelled of damp earth and moss, of rain that had fallen just hours earlier. I remember turning off the engine and sitting there for a moment, hands still on the steering wheel, listening. No horns, no sirens, no neighbors arguing through thin apartment walls. Just wind in the trees and a distant bird call. I had waited 40 years for that sound. The cottage itself was small, smaller than the apartment I had sold. But it felt larger the moment I stepped inside. The wooden floors creaked under my weight, as if acknowledging me. Sunlight filtered through lace curtains I had sewn myself years ago and never used. The fireplace hadn't been lit in a long time, and the walls smelled faintly of pine and dust. It wasn't perfect. But neither was I anymore, and that made it ours. I retired quietly. No farewell party, no gold watch. Just a handshake and a polite email thanking me for my years of dedicated service. 37 years of early mornings, packed lunches, deadlines, and swallowed exhaustion, reduced to a single sentence. I didn't mind. I had already learned that the loudest sacrifices are rarely remembered. My husband had passed 5 years earlier. A good man, tired in the way men become when they spend their lives providing and forget to live. After he was gone, the apartment felt like a waiting room, always full of memories, never of comfort. Our daughter had her own life then. A husband, children, needs. They always had needs. I was useful. And when you are useful, people don't ask how you are. They assume you exist to be used. The first weeks in the forest were difficult. I woke early out of habit, my body still tuned to alarms that no longer rang. I made coffee for 2, then remembered there was only me. I reached for my phone often, expecting messages that didn't come, but slowly, something softened. I learned the rhythm of the place. Mornings belonged to the birds, afternoons to the sun warming the porch steps. Evenings to the fire. I finally learned how to light properly after 3 failed attempts and a good laugh at myself. I repaired what I could with my own hands. A loose fence board, a leaking tap. I planted herbs behind the cottage basil, rosemary. Thyme, because growing things made me feel useful in a way that didn't drain me. No one demanded anything from me here. No one needed dinner by 6. No one needed childcare. No one needed money just until next month. For the first time in my life, my time belonged to me. I thought often of the years I had given away so freely, babysitting grandchildren while their parents just ran errands that lasted all day. Lending money I never saw again. Hosting holidays while everyone else relaxed, glasses filled, feet up, while I worked quietly in the kitchen. I had told myself it was love, and it was, at least on my side. But love, I learned too late, should never require you to disappear. One afternoon, while sitting on the porch with a cup of tea, I realized something that startled me. I was happy, not the loud kind of happiness people post online, not the kind that needs witnesses, but a steady, gentle peace that settled in my bones. I didn't miss the city, I didn't miss the noise, and though it pained me to admit it, I didn't miss being needed. The forest asked nothing from me except respect. I gave it gladly. The phone rang on a Thursday. The sound cut through the quiet like a crack in glass. I stared at it for a long moment before answering. The name on the screen wasn't my daughter's. It was her husband's. That alone tightened something in my chest. I answered anyway, and with that single call, the silence I had earned, the silence I had built with my own hands, began to fracture. But I didn't know yet how sharp the break would be. I almost didn't answer. Something in me knew in the way the body knows before the mind catches up. That peace never breaks gently. It shatters, and it usually arrives wearing a familiar voice. "Hello," I said at last. He didn't ask how I was. "He never did. Mom, am I sonnin'?" Law said, already sighing, as if this call were an inconvenience. "We've been talking, and we've decided something." Asterisk, we've decided. Asterisk, those words alone told me everything. Decisions had always been made around me, not with me. I was informed after the fact, expected to adjust, expected to agree. I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window, at the trees standing tall and unmoved by human plans. "Yes," I said, "our parents are going to move in with you." The sentence landed without warning, no pause. No question mark, just a statement, heavy and final, like a door slamming shut. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "Your parents, yes," he replied. "They need clean air. The city's not good for them anymore, and you have all that space now. Asterisk, all that space. Asterisk, the cottage had 2 bedrooms. 1 bathroom, a kitchen small enough that 2 people bumped elbows, but to him it was empty space waiting to be claimed." "I wasn't aware," I began. "There's nothing to discuss," he interrupted. "They'll be there next week." I felt my fingers curl around the phone. Next week. They had planned an entire relocation into my life, without so much as asking if I had room for it. "I moved here to be alone," I said carefully. "I told you that." A short laugh came through the speaker. "Not unkind, worse. Dismissive. Come on," he said. "You don't need all that quiet. You'll get bored out there." Bored. As if solitude were a flaw, as if my peace were an inconvenience, and if I don't agree, I asked. There was a pause then, brief but deliberate. "Then you can come back to the city," he said. Simple. Just like that. As if my life were a coat I could hang up when it no longer suited them. As if the cottage, bought with my savings, repaired with my hands, was a temporary experiment they could cancel. My throat tightened. "Have you spoken to my daughter?" I asked. Another pause. "She knows?" he said. "She agrees it makes sense." That was the moment the air left my lungs, not the demand, not the arrogance. The silence behind his words. I waited for her voice to join the call, for her to say, asterisk, "Mom, we'll talk about this." Asterisk, for her to ask if I was okay. She didn't. She never even took the phone. After we hung up, I sat very still. The forest continued its quiet work, outside, leaves shifting, birds calling, life going on untouched by human entitlement. I envied it. Memories surfaced, uninvited. My daughter calling in tears years ago because childcare had fallen through. Me canceling plans, driving across town without hesitation. Holidays I hosted because you do it best, Mom. Money loaned because we're family. I had mistaken dependence for love. And now, because I had dared to choose myself, they were taking it back. That evening, my daughter finally called. Her voice was careful, practiced. "Mom," she said, "you heard from him." "Yes," I replied. "Well, you know how his parents are," she continued. "They're older, difficult, they'll need help, so will I said quietly. She hesitated. "It's just this makes the most sense." When had my comfort stopped making sense? I moved there to rest. I said, "I gave my whole life to raising you. I just wanted." "I know." She interrupted gently, the way people do when they don't actually want to hear the rest. "But you're strong, you'll manage." Strong. Strong people, I realized, are often chosen to carry burdens no one else wants. She ended the call with promises to visit soon. She always promised that. I stood by the window long after the sky darkened, phone cold in my hand. I could have argued. I could have cried. I could have begged them to reconsider. I did none of those things, because something inside me, something old and tired and finally awake, understood a simple truth. If they believed they could take my peace without asking, it was because I had taught them they could. And this time I would teach them something else. I slept poorly that night, but not from fear. It was clarity that kept me awake. There is a moment rare, sharp, and irreversible when you stop asking asterisk why asterisk someone treats you badly and begin asking asterisk why you allow it asterisk. That moment arrived for me somewhere between midnight and dawn, while the forest stood watch outside my window. By morning my hands were steady. I brewed coffee and opened the folder where I kept the documents for the cottage. The deed, the land survey, the permits, every page bore my name and mine alone. I had insisted on that when I bought the place, though at the time I hadn't known why. Now I did. This was not a family home. It was my home, and no one moved in without my consent. I didn't call anyone to argue. I didn't warn them. I let them believe what they wanted. There is power in silence when it is chosen. Instead, I began to prepare. First, I walked through the cottage slowly, as if seeing it for the first time. I measured spaces with my eyes, considered what belonged where, and what no longer needed to be accessible. The smaller bedroom, the one they had already claimed in their minds, became storage. I moved boxes in, stacked them carefully, then installed a sturdy lock. Legal, practical, final, the closet in the main room followed. So did the shed. I wasn't hiding anything. I was defining boundaries. Next came the rules. I sat at the kitchen table and wrote them by hand before typing them neatly on my old laptop. Not emotional, not aggressive, just clear. No long-term guests, no unannounced visits, no shared utilities. No assumption of care, cooking, or maintenance. I printed 2 copies, one for myself, one for them. I also drafted a simple notice, polite, formal, unmistakable, stating that the property was privately owned and not available for permanent or extended occupancy by anyone other than the owner. I slipped it into an envelope. The gift needed wrapping. I spoke to the neighbors next. There weren't many, 3 cottages scattered along the dirt road, but they were kind people who respected distance. I explained calmly that relatives might arrive expecting to stay without my permission. If they caused trouble, I said I'd appreciate a call. They nodded, understanding more than they said. I also visited the small local office in town, asked questions, confirmed rights, took notes. Knowledge is a quiet armor. The hardest part was emotional. I packed away photographs, wedding pictures, baby pictures, smiling moments frozen in time before entitlement crept in. Not because they hurt, but because I needed to remember who I was now, not who I had been for others. I left one photo on the shelf. Myself, younger, standing alone on a hiking trail, hair windblown, smiling freely. I had been her once. I was becoming her again. In the days that followed, messages arrived. They'll be there Saturday. Make sure there's room. They don't eat spicy food. I replied to none of them. Silence, when used well, unsettles people who are used to control. At night, I sat by the fire and listened to the crackle of wood, to the owls calling in the dark. I felt no guilt. Guilt belongs to those who know they've done wrong. I had done nothing except refuse to disappear. On Friday evening, I cleaned the cottage thoroughly, not for them, for myself. I set the table for one. I cooked a meal I loved. I slept deeply without dreams. By morning, the forest was bright and still. I stood on the porch, breathing in pine and damp earth, and felt something I hadn't felt in years, anticipation. Not fear, not anger, just the calm certainty that when they arrived, they would finally understand something they had never bothered to learn. Kindness is not an invitation to invade. Silence is not agreement, and a woman who has found her peace will defend it. With grace, the gift was ready. All that remained was for them to open it. They arrived just after noon. I heard the car before I saw it, the unfamiliar grind of tires on gravel, the engine idling too loudly for a place that preferred whispers. I didn't move from the porch. I had already poured my tea. The cup was warm in my hands. The car door slammed. Then another. Voices followed, confident, expectant. My son-in-law appeared first, keys already in his hand, as though the house recognized him. Behind him came his parents, pulling wheeled suitcases that bumped awkwardly over the uneven ground. They looked around with approval, not curiosity. "This is nice," his mother said, quiet. "Just what we need." No one looked at me, not really. I was part of the scenery now, the caretaker, the background, my son-in-law stepped onto the porch and reached for the door. It didn't open. He frowned and tried again. Locked. "Did you change the lock?" he asked, irritation creeping into his voice. "Yes," I said calmly. He turned to me then, surprised, as if noticing me for the first time. "Why?" I set my teacup down and stood. "Because this is my home." The words felt solid, heavy, true. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "All right, very funny. Open up." I didn't move. "That won't be necessary," I said. "You won't be staying." The air shifted. His parents exchanged glances. Confusion flickered across their faces. "What do you mean?" his father asked. "We just drove 3 hours." "I know," I replied. "That must have been tiring." My son-in-law's voice hardened. "Mom, don't start this. We already discussed it." "No," I said. "You announced it." He stepped closer. "You can't do this." I met his eyes. "I already have." I reached into the small basket beside the door and handed him the envelope. "What's this?" he snapped. "Information," I said. He tore it open and skimmed the page. I watched his face change, confidence giving way to disbelief, then anger. "It says," I interrupted gently, "that this property is privately owned by me and not available for extended or permanent guests." His mother scoffed. "This is ridiculous. We're family." I nodded. "Family asks. Family respects answers." He crumpled the paper in his fist. "So what? You expect them to just leave?" "Yes." Silence fell heavy and uncomfortable. "You can't be serious," he said. "Where are they supposed to go?" "That," I replied, "is something you should have planned before deciding where I would live." His parents looked embarrassed now. Hurt? I felt no triumph, only a quiet, steady calm. My daughter arrived minutes later, breathless, eyes darting between us. "Mom, please," she said. "Why are you doing this?" I looked at her, the woman I had raised, the child I had loved without limits. "I'm not doing this *to* you," I said softly. "I'm doing it for myself." Her eyes filled with tears. "You didn't even tell us. You didn't ask," I replied. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Understanding is painful when it arrives late. The argument faded quickly after that. There was nowhere for it to go. The locks stayed locked. The rules stayed firm. Eventually, suitcases were loaded back into the car. No one said goodbye. I watched the vehicle disappear down the road, swallowed by trees. The forest exhaled. That evening, I lit the fire and sat by the window. The sky turned gold, then violet. Birds settled for the night. Peace returned, not fragile this time, but rooted. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. Freedom, I learned, doesn't always come from changing others. Sometimes it comes from finally refusing to be moved. I took my tea onto the porch and listened to the silence I had earned. And this time it stayed.